Good morning, everybody. Oh my God, it's on. Sorry. I did not think that you would have it on already, so I thought I had to scream at the audience, and then I made everybody deaf. I apologize if I've made you deaf. Welcome to this session this afternoon. Always good to have a session after lunch because then you have energy. They served wine and beer, so you're really absolutely ready, full of energy, ready to listen to what has to be the most interesting and scintillating topic that one could ever think of, compliance. Exactly, let's get some cheers for automated compliance. There we go, now we're talking. Now we are talking. But I will say, sorry? Did somebody say? I thought somebody had a smart comment. Anyway, I love automated compliance, but I'm weird. I am an expert in public policy working for TNO, which is a research institute in the Netherlands. I love things like public procurement and compliance and all kinds of things that most people find very boring. But in the context of data spaces, why is compliance so interesting? Well, go to Belgium, talk to farmers that in the field of agriculture must deal with compliance so that we are not killed by eating food that we should not be eating. All of that needs to be traced. All kinds of data sharing needs to happen. It's complicated, it's expensive. And if I have some tool of some kind that can help me with compliance and will save me money, that is super obvious as a value proposition. That is something very, very concrete. That is not, oh, it will lead to innovation. Oh, it will lead to economic growth. Oh, it will lead to all of these wonderful things, which are critically important from a public policy perspective. But if I am an ordinary farmer that needs to be convinced that a data space is something that I should be engaging with, you need to give me something very concrete. And automated compliance is one of those things. It is a value proposition. It is a use case that is being used already. And that's what we are here to address today. So we are going to have a session where we're going to be introduced in different sectors of the economy around automated compliance and around actual solutions. We're even going to have a demo at some point of the session so that we can see things that are actually happening, which is very exciting. It's not just words, 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 but actions. Because that's the stage where we are at with data spaces. We are no longer at the stage of developing what the concepts should be. It's like, no, now we're at the stage, we're at a geopolitical moment where now is the moment that things need to happen, and this is an area where it is happening. So, with that said, we're gonna start this session off with a fireside chat. And you know, because it's a fireside chat, you should imagine that there's a little fire here at the stage, and that might mean that the people in the back want to move up, for example, because it's very cold back there where you're sitting. And I know you want to look at your emails and all of that stuff, but please feel free to move forward because you might have a chance to ask a question. Or maybe not.
There is a test at the end.
Oh, there's a test at the end. See, I forgot. I wasn't supposed to mention that. I was supposed to grab them on the way out. Anyway, so I would like to invite to the stage, as soon as I find my notes, which I've put down over here. So we have Björn Jurecki. I don't even have to read it. I think I remembered. You've all been introduced to him this morning already. There's a big round of applause. There's a wave that happens over here, so please feel free to take a seat. And we have Doris Marcat. There was a bit of a... I try my best here in terms of being able to introduce things. So before we get into the presentations, and the point where you start taking pictures of the PowerPoints, which I always think is like really great. People are taking pictures of PowerPoints because PowerPoints are so incredibly exciting to show to your children when you get home from this event. But before we get to that, we're going to have a little bit of a chat here. So we have some prearranged questions around compliance. But as I said, this is a fireside chat, so if there's some point of the conversation where you desperately want to jump in because you're a burning question that you might have for the commission, this would be the moment to do it, including the people way there in the back that we can barely see, but you know, if you put your hand up. Yeah, see, there's some waving going on in the back. It's great. We'll be able to have a conversation. So, I'm also going to take a seat. So, we start with Björn. And let's start off with just the idea of, that I introduced, that, regulatory compliance, there is a clear value proposition. That there's something there that if I'm doing a pitch, I can put up on a slide that this will save you money at the end of the day. Now, as a part of this data union strategy, there's an aim to further sort of this idea of automated compliance. And I read the term one-click compliance, which sounds really cool. It sounds like something Microsoft would do, actually. Well, one click. It was like one-click shopping and one-click. So maybe you can describe a little bit more to us what is meant by that term, one-click compliance. What's the desire?
Sure, happy to do so. Thanks, David, for the introduction. And yeah, glad to see so many people interested in this topic, which some consider dry, but I think if you look at it from what you just said, David, it's actually probably the killer application, or the first killer application for data spaces. And this is also how we came into this discussion. There's already lots of data in data spaces, lots of compliance-related data. And we thought, okay, why can't we use that data to automate compliance procedures which are getting on everybody's nerves? As you said, it's the farmer who's struggling with complying all the various rules they have to deal with. And I think Doris will go a bit deeper into that particular aspect as well. So we also set up a little funding scheme, which we're currently evaluating on selecting some pilot projects in this area, automating compliance. We saw really good uptake, I think, by the community in this call for proposals, and we will soon announce the results. So, I mean, there is definitely interest, I think, in this community to go in that direction. And if you look at a data space like Catena X, I think, they also, their raison d'etre, their original raison d'etre was as well, how can we comply easier with regulation? And one of their services is, for example, compliance with the battery regulation. So this is really something that data spaces can do and should do more. And I think this session is also, for that reason, very important. And the final element of that, I think, before I come to one-click compliance, is also that it helps us policymakers to make better decisions. I mean, through this, we also get access to information, how our rules are applied on the ground, and that can inform our policy making and hopefully also improve it in the future. So this is really a win-win for everybody, I would say. So one-click compliance is, at this stage, a very conceptual stage. So it's not that we're rolling this out tomorrow. And we're also consulting on this as part of the digital fitness check that my boss, Renate Nicolai, mentioned in her opening speech. So please have a look at the digital fitness check. And if you have any views on this concept and automation compliance more generally, please let us know your views. The idea is that you outsource the compliance to a third party, like a consultancy, for example, that would, on the one hand, look at your databases you have, and on the other hand, look at the relevant regulation. And then if they think you're in compliance with the regulation, they would issue like a digital compliance token, something like the digital vaccination certificate that we did a while ago. And you could then, as a company, store this digital compliance token in your digital business wallet and communicate that to the regulatory authorities without submitting paper documents and so on and so forth. So they could access relevant compliance information through this digital compliance token. This is a bit the concept. It's very conceptual, as I said, at this stage, but we would love to hear more from you, including maybe at this stage. So if you have any questions, any comments, please also let me know here.
So after this session, you'll all be expected to go out and have a conversation with Bjorn about how you're going to make this happen?
All of you.
I want to be clicking. Sorry? There's just a nod of absolutely. The promised land that we are going towards. So it does raise the question, though, because a lot of what needs to happen is around data sharing, right? Not necessarily data spaces, but data sharing, right? In order for that to happen, it is about unlocking particular data sets and making it available. And obviously, data spaces is the name of the conference, is one of the key solutions that we're talking about today. But if I can maybe turn this to Doris. So in your view, what is the added value that data spaces are providing rather than some other solution around data sharing? Is there something that is unique in the proposition of a data space?
Yes, thank you for the question. If you look at compliance, data spaces become particularly relevant if you have reporting requirements, and moreover, or more specifically, if you have multi-source requirements. For instance, in the value chain, or as Boris mentioned it today, in the value network, because the value chains become more and more complex, or if one company has multiple reporting requirements and using the same data. So then the added value of data spaces become particularly evident. So let me highlight 3 key advantages I see. So we all know data spaces offer, let's say, a sovereign, interoperable backbone with network structures for data sharing. And that is a key advantage if you have multiple recording requirements. That brings us to the second step. So data spaces allow to synergistically to fulfill B2G, business to government reporting requirements, but also business to business reporting requirements. Because if we are honest, business to business reporting requirements, you mentioned agriculture, for instance, are quite high in some sectors, for instance, to receive a label. Or because we have, let's say, business to government requirements and you have to report to other company. So in the data space, you can coordinate. We have an interoperable, secure data framework with an ecosystem where we can share and fulfill the different reporting requirements in one step and save administrative burden because we do not reformat the requirements. And then let me share one third advantage, which I think is particularly relevant for smaller companies. It relates already a little bit to the click compliance, but it's one step before. Because one key advantage, and where we are already there, without, let's say, at least in many data spaces we have around here, is that data spaces set out a framework where one company, particularly, for instance, a micro enterprise overwhelmed with the requirements of reporting, can authorize another company, a data holder, to share the data in a specific format on his or its behalf. And that is a key advantage to save, let's say, capacities and to ease the life of companies. So overall, companies can save administrative burden, reduce them, and companies receiving data benefit from receiving consistent data set, more correct. And let me highlight one point, which is quite important if you want to scale the system and bring it to adoption. Also, the administration benefits from that because the error rate in data reporting is likely to be reduced. And that, in a system perspective, are the key advantages I see.
Mm-hmm. So if I can ask a small follow-up. When you see those advantages, like obviously if I'm talking seeds and agriculture, then all of the data is within a single data space, and you have other compliance that will be potentially across multiple data spaces. So when you're thinking about compliance issues, is the goal that at some point we have a federation of sorts of data spaces to ease that compliance?
So I think for seeds, in any case, they thought about a federation of data sharing initiatives and data spaces. But I think the key aspect to be achieved when developing an interoperability framework is to consider the B2B requirements and, let's say, be it legally binding standards or informal quasi-standards, to have them and sync them together with the B2G requirements and vice versa. And if that is a system approach which gets rolled out, and I see in some countries we see activities in that direction. You mentioned Belgium, but I learned this morning in Spain it's similar going on. So I think that is great and would be really a relief for all the parties in the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So to bring Bjorn, to bring you back in, and obviously the Commission on some level presents a vision, but it is also investing, right? Like a lot of the initiatives here is around EU funding, and the EU is investing in technologies to automate compliance, Horizon Europe, Digital Europe program. So how do these programs help to shape the automated compliance agenda? So maybe you can talk us a little bit through that.
So we have two funding streams, if you want. One is more the Horizon Europe one, and the other one is the Digital Europe one. And just for those that don't know, Digital Europe is more about digital infrastructures, concrete implementations, deployment, and Horizon Europe is more the classical research type of project you see. And what we in particular wanted to do with the Digital Europe funding scheme is to show that this is not theoretical, that this can actually work in practice. So we want to fund a couple of pilot projects. As I said, they're currently in the evaluation to show to us internally, to all stakeholders, to companies, that this can work. And we have now this call in the evaluation, roughly 8 million euros. So we expect 2 to 3 projects coming out of this. And then a follow-up call later this year with another 8 million euros, again selecting a couple of pilot projects, so that at the end of this year we can have like a portfolio of like, say, 5 to 6 projects that we can advertise internally and externally to show, yes, this is not theoretical and this can work. And we complemented this with some funding in Horizon Europe to develop a bit more the underlying technologies, if you want, the automated data analytics, also easy interfaces and so on. And I think that's also an important aspect. The ease of use of these kind of like applications must be super high. I mean, if you're the farmer, coming back to that example, you don't want to need a PhD in computer science to do that. And the same is true for regulatory authorities. They're also quite often local or regional. So the ease of interfacing these kind of tools must be super high. And this is also one of our, focus of the research funding we're doing as part of Horizon Europe.
Mm-hmm. So to turn it to Doris and to put you on a spot with the top 3. So, I mean, we've talked about agriculture, energy is always an interesting space, but where do you see the greatest untapped potential? Do you have a top 3, for example?
Top 3. So now you challenge me, but
you're going to write them on the board.
No, you're right. So in the area of sustainability reporting, where we need a lot of multi-source reporting, either along the value chain or in the case of stability, like emission recording, that we have multi-sources. And indeed, there we observe already the data space initiative addressing it at different maturity levels and with different geographical outreach. But if you ask me where I see untapped potential, let me name 2 areas for the moment. So the first one is in the cross-domain area. Naturally, the data space ecosystems and their use cases develop in sectorial contexts. So it's normal that they don't discover the cross-domain use cases for compliance at the beginning. But if you look, for instance, at sustainable finance, where you need the data for reporting from different sectors, that would be a prominent use case where you could roll out and bring the different data spaces together and test, okay, how can we achieve compliance and in reporting using the potential of the different, let's say, data spaces out there. And the second area where I would like to shed light on is using the potential for B2B and B2G compliance together. So, and if you here think, for instance, that we have a lot of small companies, for instance, bringing us back to agriculture or also to crafts, let's say, and enterprises, that they have to report to multiple bigger companies. And let's say also, for instance, a farmer to different dairies with different sustainability schemes and labels with different data requirements, making it the life for the farmer, for instance, quite heavy. So here, data space could come in with a common framework, common interoperability framework, having common standards and data formats and easing the life for the farmer, having 10 diaries, but the same reporting requirements, at least the same data formats. And ideally in such an ecosystem, also the B2G component is considered. So that would be my top 2, where I think the data spaces could focus on.
Top 2 is good as well. We don't need to have... It's always academics. They always want things in 3s and 5s. So I feel obliged to, ask for things in 3s and 5s or in a quadrant.
The third comes from the discussion later, so I think they will add up.
So in the 1 minute and 43 seconds that we have left, that's a nice clock that we have here to remind us. I'll just open to the last question. Either one of you can answer it, because we've been talking about what data spaces can do for automated compliance. But we have other initiatives, business wallets, for example, is one of them. Are there other important developments that would also need to be forwarded in order to help with the automated compliance goal, the single compliance?
I think the business wallet will play a key role. I mean, this we have only proposed a couple months ago, so it's still quite a new proposal, especially the business wallet. I mean, we have the citizen wallet already, but the business wallet. And this will be, I think, the main vehicle to communicate between companies and regulatory authorities at one point. I mean, this is nothing that needs to happen now in terms of data space preparation, because we've put forward the proposal. It will easily take a year until the proposal is negotiated in the European Parliament and the European Council, and then another year until it starts being implemented. So data space still have some time to, think about that issue. But I understand also from the discussions that are during lunch break, but this whole topic of identification is a big topic for data spaces more generally, not just for compliance. And I think all data spaces are thinking about that already, and we hope that with the European Business Wallet, we can also facilitate that discussion.
Yeah, considering...
You have 20 seconds to wrap it all up.
You challenged me when I challenged now the data spaces. Okay, if we have 12 months to go and our focus is on adoption, so I would encourage the data spaces to first map the potential cases, where can we achieve with B2B and B2G reporting exercises, let's say the data flows and overlapping scenarios, the most potential for reducing administrative burdens. Second step, to demonstrate it with hard figures, what is the cost-saving potential for those, let's say, applications, because we have to convince companies and potentially the administration to adopt it. That might be a system shift. So we have to demonstrate the return of investment of adopting such a system. And that brings me to the third step. Okay, mobilize investment in the data spaces by revealing the added value of, for instance, using data spaces for compliance and reporting obligations, and then make the data spaces viable and, let's say, reaching out and increasing adoption.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope this helped to kind of shape now what we will see from the rest of our speakers, which are examples. We can get big raucous applause. Thank you very much. And of course, if you have any questions and comments, then they will be available after the session. You could write a note and pass it to them during the session, as long as I don't see. But now we will proceed to the concrete examples at the end of the day. And Bertrand van der Lee.
Thank you.
It's not. I'm working hard on the pronunciation, so
Yeah.
but I pass the floor along, and I will just. That clock over there will glare at you at the moment that you have to stop. And I will also glare, but you won't see me.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you to give me the chance to speak before you today. Today, I want to share a conviction that drives my work. Compliance by design can transform regulatory constraints into innovation accelerators. My name is Bertrand van der Lee. I lead IT regulatory, I don't know what to do with my glasses. I lead IT regulatory watch at Crédit Agricole Group, where I focus on accelerating and simplifying the implementation of regulation across all our IT projects and initiatives. For context, Crédit Agricole is a major European banking group with more than 8,000 branches worldwide. We are the leading financier of the French economy. I have other figures, but I stop here. Today, I will address 4 critical questions related to compliance. First, what's at stake? How do we address it? What does it mean concretely? And what's the connection to data spaces? First, what are we talking about? More precisely, how much it matters. 20% of European banks' IT costs are compliance related. This share has grown recently with GDPR, DORA, CSRD, and other regulations. These costs encompass both regulatory compliance and internal policy compliance. For a systemic European bank, this means managing around 80 local and European regulations impacting IT and systems, and numerous sectoral regulations and standards. We have wrote a corpus for our IT collaborators, which describe the landscape in which we manage. The regulatory landscape we operate in is not only dense, it's accelerating. The cost of compliance will tend to grow further without action. It's due to proliferation of regulations and standards, increased cybersecurity requirements, and mandatory automation of reporting and monitoring. A significant portion of this is dedicated to the security compliance of IT infrastructures and to regulatory projects themselves, DORA, CSRD, and so. The scope we focus on is the compliance of all IT initiatives and projects, representing roughly 1/3 of the total compliance cost. Our ambition is to reduce the cost and time to compliance, but also the cost and time to prove compliance by about 30% to 50% through automation. To give you an idea, 120 million euros could be saved annually on compliance at Crédit Agricole. It means every month of delay means 10 million euros lost. How do we address it? We must integrate compliance from the design phase, compliance by design. The old school approach of late stage compliance no longer works. Adding compliance at project end creates delays, rework, and compliance debt. Ensuring and demonstrating compliance is becoming impossible without systematic approaches and automation. The paradigm shifts from reactive to proactive. And what does it mean concretely? Automated compliance by design means translating regulatory requirements into standards, patterns, and automated controls, embedded throughout the development lifecycle. Concretely, it unfolds in 3 stages. Regulatory texts are transformed into clear rules, then into guidelines, architecture patterns, and IT standards. This is where we are. And so we operationalize these rules through project templates, CI/CD pipelines, and common IT component when needed. So compliance is embedded automatically. This is our focus for 2026. And then we automate controls and evidence collection and enable continuous compliance measurement. This is not about adding more documents. It's about industrializing and simplifying compliance, making it reusable everywhere across the group. The benefits are, for IT teams, fewer fixes, less audit risks, and smoother deployments. For the group's companies, industrialized compliance, more reliable and less costly. And for the group, resources freed from compliance overhead and redirected toward innovation. What's the connection to data spaces? Data spaces rely on interoperability, governance, trust, and security. They require shared rules, identity, access control, usage traceability, data attached policies, and automated technical evidence of compliance. Compliance by design provide exactly this foundation. Policies integrated into code and workflows, governance metadata, native auditability, and adherence with transnational and sectoral obligations. This is exactly what we are doing with Gaia-X, drafting criteria from Data Act and Security, Cyber Resilience Act. The work on geographic and domain extensions leads to building an architecture for automated compliance, whereby data spaces can assess their own rules. Compliance by design is not a cost. It's a strategic industrialization investment. Thank you for your attention.
And with a minute and a half left, so thank you very much. That was wonderful. I'm sure some of you might want to come to Bertrand afterwards to talk about compliance by design, which is interesting to think about in terms of actually operationalizing that. What does it mean? I would be curious to talk to you about who would actually own this data space that is facilitating compliance between various financial institutions and government, because obviously there'll be a governance authority of some kind, and who owns that governance authority, especially given the sensitive financial data. But that's something we can talk about at the break. Next, I will not have to struggle with the pronunciation of the name, because he is a colleague of mine, and I've lived in, you can hear from my Dutch accent, but I've lived in the Netherlands for some time, so I know it is Geert Lammerichs. Is that all right? Is that all right? Yeah, thank you. Also, applause for my pronunciation, I think.
Yeah, it was very good.
It was very good, thank you.
I'm very impressed.
I thank you very much. So
I hope my English is as good as your Dutch.
Oh, that's very kind.
And then we'll be fine. I'm afraid to say that after the inspiring speech of Bertrand, I actually do have slides, but I promise there will be pictures in there so you can show your kids. All right, anyways, so with regards to data space for the flexible staffing industry, my name is Geert Lammerichs. I have been working as a consultant within TNO, mainly focused on getting data spaces and business models combined. So really making sure that a data space is actually useful, gets somewhere for the different parties and entities involved in it. And I think this is one of the most recent projects I've embarked on, and I think one of the most interesting to share with you, because it's really about, can we make this a business case? And so the flexible staffing industry, we entered into that with the CETU board. And the CETU board is a foundation in the Netherlands, which is staffed by parties that actually have that are commercial parties that are in the flexible staffing industry. You see the logos there for you on the right-hand side. Randstad, Manpower, Otto Workforce, Adecco. The ABU is actually a party that is hosting that. It's a branch organization. And so the CETU provides open data standards to speed up the administrative processes of flexible staffing. There's no competitive advantage that these companies can achieve by being more efficient in administrating their different hour nodes and providing invoices. Speed is everything in this branch. And so the speed of placement, the speed of getting somebody there on the working floor for their customers is the most important thing. And so the CETU is working on reducing costs and increasing the speed. And this is where compliance comes in, because compliance obviously hampers that movement. So we went on a journey to redefine the role of CETU, because they noticed that just providing the standards is insufficient to actually getting more people into their organization. And so we went on a goal to find out under what conditions a data space is interesting for CETU and its participants, and if it's interesting, how the implementation would look like. And we did that through 5 workshops, and I'll explain a little bit more in a bit where those workshops came from. The first workshop was basically a webinar, what is a data space? The second workshop, we took the CETU board and we went into the scope and vision of the data space, basically the dot on the horizon. It wasn't just grand talks about strategy and vision, we also started identifying the use cases. Much like Doris was talking about, what are the individual use cases within that larger scope and vision that could make this data space work? And we selected one of those use cases to further work out and see what the business model is. Why one? Well, you need to start somewhere. If you have one, you have focus, and we can quickly get to a result that you can use. Then we went on to designing the pilot. That workshop actually still needs to happen. And another workshop that we're still working on, which will happen next week, is the technical insights. So really looking into what is necessary for this data space to come into existence. But they've already indicated that they are willing to do a pilot here. So that's really interesting. So what is this use case? The use case is CLA equitable pay, and CLA stands for Collective Labor Agreement, or in Dutch, CAO. And what is this all about? Well, imagine you have a factory. That's the employer in this case. They've got factory workers. They work on the line, they produce things, and when they do that, they get benefits. And your benefits are generally divided up in primary benefits, salary, and secondary benefits, which is vacation days, mobility, pensions, that type of stuff. Now imagine they get a really big order in and they need to expand production. So they hire a flexible worker. This flexible worker is provided to them by a flexible staffing agency. Now, what needs to happen with this new legislation that entered into existence January 1st this year? Basically, if the flex worker is doing the job of the people on the factory floor, they need to be paid the equitable amount. So proportional to the time that they work at the factory, 2 days a week, 3 months, a full year, they need to be paid the equivalent of these benefits. That requires a lot of calculation. And so you can imagine there's a lot of data going from basically the factory of the employers about these benefits to the flexible staffing agency. But as you perhaps know in your own companies, maybe there are different types of benefits. Imagine the flexible staffer is not working at the factory floor, but at the office. That might require different benefits, and also they need to be shared with this flexible staffing agency. This is, again, another data stream. And so you can imagine that there's a ton of data which needs to be exchanged between all of the employers that hire flexible workers and all of the flexible staffing agencies that provide these workers to them. So, this is where a data space comes in. And so how does compliance then become a business case? There are some systemic needs. Basically, multiple parties need the same data, right? All of the flexible staffers need all of the data of these companies that have these different benefit schemes. The data is expensive to produce. It requires a lot of going back and forth, and you need the data in a specific format so that you can calculate what exactly it is that the company needs to pay the flexible staffer. Then the parties are currently creating an information monopoly. If data is expensive to gather, it would be really nice if I can gather as much as possible about it, because then I can make a business model. And so the data space tries to resolve that. And companies specifically, we can increase the speed of onboarding and placement because compliance takes less time. We can reduce errors, and also the data space creates an equal field of play because this data can be exchanged between the different participants, and you can create, again, some sort of equal field. There's no competitive advantage to be had if you already have this thing. The competitive advantage is speed and correct placement of flexible labor. Now, where did the workshops come from? The DSSC has developed the co-creation method. I'm the lead author of that method. And basically, we defined 5 different processes that help you go through the building blocks to set up your own data space. And we discovered that although this was useful, this mainly explains what you would need to do, but not how you could make these decisions. And so we've developed 8 workshops, a couple of that which we tested with the SETU, and each of these workshops are connected to these different processes. And so by providing these workshops, after the first 3 workshops, so the webinar, workshop 1, workshop 2 and 3, we combined it to one workshop of a full day. Basically, the companies went from, I have no idea what a data space is, to 3 workshops later, let's do a pilot. There was an amazing result there. And these workshops will be put online in the upcoming month with the publishing of Blueprint 3.0. The blueprint is already out there. The workshops and all of the documentation with that will be placed online as well. And so this was basically the basis of our trajectory with the SETU board. And we will be going further and creating this pilot. So what have we learned? Basically, create a shared goal is really interesting. Why? We put together several competitors, basically, right? There was literally talk at some point in time, oh, you managed to take this client from us, and we placed somebody there now, and you did that before, and it was very friendly, but still, I mean, you were talking about one company getting business from the other company. So creating a shared goal really helps with aligning everybody and making sure that they want to collaborate in this. Getting concrete quickly through use case helped as well. Workshop 3, we went into, so what exactly is the data we're exchanging, who's exchanging that, and which parties are involved. Super concrete. Then Do not try and solve every problem before starting a pilot. There's still some things that we don't know yet. But we are designing a pilot and we are designing a project to make sure that we start implementing the things that we do know. And from there on, the new problems that we will encounter will solve along the way. Involve industry early on, that's really important. It's really important for you to quickly get to the different parties that will actually start sharing the data. And so we involved also parties around the SETU board to talk about how the solution would work, what use case was interesting, etc. And finally, use existing software and parties to create results quickly. There's already a ton out there. The DSSC toolbox has a lot of implementations on, for example, the participant agents, but there's already a lot of parties that provide basically entire out-of-the-box data spaces. Start using those, and you can start sharing data within 1 or 2 months already. And so that is also what we've done here, and that's what turned out to be very successful for this group of people. That was my time. Thank you very much.
30 seconds, man. Well done.
Well, let's further applause. Thank you.
I always look for the best speakers at the end of the day. Thank you very much, Geert. Obviously also introduces lots of questions. We'll be curious to see the co-creation method, as it is called, in the DSSC, because as we move into this implementation phase, now it's time for those tools that are to get your hands dirty at the end of the day. How do we make this thing happen? Not what are the principles. No. And the toolbox is also important, so it's nice to see that in action. But now, you get 2 for the price of 1. We have a dynamic duo that will come up to the stage. The very paragon of public-private partnership, as we have working together Fraunhofer and Microsoft. So we have Tom Hulsmann and also Erik Barnstedt.
Thank you.
Again, if the pronunciation is wrong, they can correct me, but
Perfect.
yeah, perfect is what I like to hear. The floor is yours, and you've got double time. So, but we have a demo. It'll be great. It'll be worth it. Floor is yours.
We will try to use it well. So hello everyone again from my side. Thanks for having me or us today. I will start talking to you a little bit about batteries now. So we heard a lot about digital product passports today, and batteries are actually a really good example for that. And so let's get right into it. So the talk or the session is titled From Factory to Road, and we are talking about batteries here. You may know these little ones or similar ones from the supermarket. What actually powers your electric car, for example, are a little bit larger batteries, like this one, for example. We call this a pouch cell. And the thing with these batteries is that in your car, obviously there is not just this one battery cell, right? It needs a lot of battery cells powering it. And they are not put in there one by one, like you put it in like your toy car maybe. But there are a lot of different steps here. So it looks like it's like a bilateral partnership here, exchange of data between 2 partners. But actually, of course, as with many other products, we have a whole value chain behind the battery cell. So actually the session is maybe mistitled a little bit because maybe it should be more from mining, so from getting the raw materials over to cell manufacturing, which is my background, over pack manufacturing, as I mentioned. These need to be put into battery packs that actually go into cars, until the car, the usage phase, where you actually drive the car, where you wear out the battery, where you charge it, discharge it. And also, we heard a lot about sustainability today already, what to do with the batteries at their end of their life after 15, 20 years when they are no longer used in your car. And yeah, data spaces, or in each of these steps, a lot of data is generated, right? And maybe we will talk a little bit closer look in battery cell manufacturing, because that's my background. So very quick introduction just. So we at Fraunhofer FFB, we have 2 research battery factories in Germany. They are for research, they are not for producing battery cells, but the nice thing is we actually have the big machines that like Tesla has, that PowerCo has, that the big German OEMs have. So we have a real industrial environment in which we can try out new things. And I'm a data scientist by trade, so what I'm really interested in, of course, is the actual production process. No worries, we won't have a deep dive into battery production today, but I want to get the point across that this process is very complex. So we have a lot of different steps in cell manufacturing that come after each other, that influence the quality of the product, but that also have an influence on different parts of the value chain, right? So we have the incoming goods for producing the first parts of the cell. There you need information about what's coming from the mine, let's say, from the raw materials. And you need to keep track of all of this data throughout the process. So we have a lot of different stages where stuff is transformed into other stuff. So we start with a liquid, which is coated on a copper foil. Then it gets separated, stacked. So we have a stack of 40 to 60 copper foils inside of such a cell. And you need to track all of this data throughout the process. An additional thing is that this process consumes a lot of energy because it happens in so-called dry rooms. So there's very little moisture in the air. We have a lot of energy consumption here. And of course, with electric vehicles, you all know it. It's always like, yeah, is it actually sustainable? And of course, you want to prove it that that the batteries inside of this vehicle are actually sustainable, right? So, yeah, basic point to take home here is we have lots of data generated at all points of this process chain, and we want, on the one hand, we want to do something with it. So I, as a data scientist, I want to use this data to improve the production process. But on the other hand, our colleagues from the EU have some regulations that are imposed on companies that are manufacturing or selling these battery systems. And this is why batteries are such a good example for digital product passports, because it's actually one of the first areas or industry areas where this battery passport or this product passport in the form of a digital battery passport will actually become mandatory starting early next year. So no worries, I won't go into detail here, but take-home message on this slide is that starting from next year, there are some basic requirements regarding, for example, CO2 emissions for producing the battery cell chemistry, so that it's easier to recycle later on, and a few more things. But this will evolve, right? As time goes on, these regulations will get stricter and stricter, and there will be more and more data that needs to be shared. So even if you are saying, okay, maybe 2027, I can do with my Excel sheet, and I can fulfill these regulations by then with my Excel sheet. When you look into the future, it's no longer sustainable, right? And on the other hand, it's not only about regulation, right? I know the session is titled compliance, but when we do collect this data and we do need it for compliance, let's also share the data across the value chain, right? For example, at the end of cell production, there are some end-of-line tests conducted, and basically the same tests are conducted again when this battery cell is shipped to the module and pack manufacturer, for example, a car manufacturer. So we do these tests in our factory, and then they do the same tests again at their factory, where you can say, okay, maybe we can have some trust between the partners there and share some data and get benefits from that, and at the same time also use this data for compliance reasons. So this is basically the motivation behind of this. As this is the first example for digital product passports that actually required in the EU, there are some solutions out there that, or some demonstrators, prototypes, let's say, from different initiatives. It mostly boils down to each of these cells is like marked with a QR code, and then you have some data lying behind that. Some examples are given here, already mentioned that before. But what I want to stress here from a battery manufacturing perspective is, let's think it from the bottom up, right? We already have some good existing standards in the manufacturing industry. We have heard before, in the talks before, about OPC-UA, which is used for connecting machines on the shop floor. In the last few years, we have also developed standards there, companion specifications, especially for battery manufacturing. So each machine producer, we've heard from the VDMA before, representing the German machine manufacturers. It was a really big hassle with our factory, getting all of the machines from different companies, and then saying, okay, we want the data, yeah, what do you want, how does it look like? And having such a companion specification is really good from a manufacturer's perspective. But when you think that through, and you already have some of these specifications, why not take this basic technology, UPC UA, and also use it in these data sharing contexts and in this battery passport context? And how such a solution could look like, I'm very happy to see some real implementations will be shown by Eric now for battery cell. Yeah.
So thank you very much. My name is Eric Barnstead, and I lead the cloud initiative inside the OPC Foundation. So who here has heard of OPC UA before? And today doesn't count. Okay, a few people. So OPC UA is the industrial interoperability standard. It's been around for 20 years, since 10 years ago roughly. It's been also growing into the cloud, into data spaces, and we do a lot of open source in the community because with a real reference implementation, adoption is vastly accelerated. So when we set up the cloud initiative, we set up a few goals that we wanted to achieve. So obviously we wanted to build on the success that OPC UA had in factories and plants and use that same success in cloud technologies and data spaces. So for example, the OPC UA modeling language is one of the best in the world, very flexible. You can model pretty much anything. So why not also model digital product passports? And that's why we said we will create a reference architecture that includes data spaces in them as well. We set up the initiative with other cloud vendors. It's the only place in the world where all the major industrial automation companies and all the major cloud providers are under one roof building these reference architectures and mapping it to their services. But we're also working with the Data Space Adoption Forum. We've just had an announcement yesterday on it, and obviously we're working with the European cloud providers as well, and they're also rolling out the same solution. Everything we do in the OPC Foundation is open source. It's MIT licensed, so it's as open as it can be. And you can use it without even being a member of the OPC Foundation. And the OPC Foundation is actually funded just through member contributions. We don't get any government funding. It's a nonprofit. So here's some of the examples of the players that we have in the cloud initiative. And most importantly, we didn't stop just at the people providing the solutions, but also the people using the solutions. That's why we have a session today on users. So we got some of the largest manufacturers to participate in what we call the End User Council to basically try out what we're producing. Is it working for you? Please give us feedback. So what does a digital product passport look like when built with OPC UA technology? So first and foremost, the DPP is a fact. It is coming. For the battery passport, you have less than a year to become compliant. So it is clear that we need to accelerate our adoption dramatically. So we obviously said, okay, inside the OPC Foundation, we have the OPC UA modeling language. Let's use that. But also, obviously, we want to use what's coming out of Sensenelec as a DPP standard interface and data model. And since OPC UA is so flexible, it was easy for us to take the specification and map it to OPC UA. And then, of course, we have several partner organizations that are already building templates for the DPP that we can leverage by simply converting them into OPC UA data models. So the templates, there's a template for the battery passport. DIN have released it last year. It's about 120 data elements in it, including usage of the battery, but also production. And what we're showing here today is a demo of production data from the battery factory that Fraunhofer is running in Germany, all the way to the cloud and into the data space. So this is the reference architecture. There's a good test at the end of my talk, so pay attention. No, I'm only messing. There's no test. But there will be a demo of this particular digital product passport library that you see here in the red circle. So this is the entire application framework that we came up with together with our end users to basically represent what a manufacturer already uses today or will be using once they also are data space compliant for digital product passports. Now, the digital product passport is only going to be successful if it can be generated automatically. Nobody will sit down and type in data for each product that they produce. That's just not practical. So it needs to be generated automatically. So we need to collect the data automatically, we need to standardize the data fully automatically, and we need to make it available to our value chain fully automatically. And this is what our goal was, to create that entire data flow. So it starts on the left. This is your factory on premises where it says manufacturer. Then the manufacturer obviously has some sort of enterprise cloud that is in use today, and we've extended it with data space capabilities. But we didn't stop there. We said, okay, let's look how we can map this reference architecture to open source so that there's no excuse. You can get started today with open source applications that are readily available on places like GitHub. And we built the entire thing up in the OPC Foundation as a test bed. We've connected the Fraunhofer factory, and we made it work. So we have a brochure that explains everything in more detail. There are several copies outside at the booth of the Data Space Adoption Forum. I encourage you to have a look of what else is available from the OPC Foundation in respect to data spaces and in general shop floor interoperability. So do you want to see it? Good, let's try it. This is in typical Eric Barnstead fashion, a demo without any safety net. So let's see how far we get. So please switch the screen. Oh, you can see it. Okay, fantastic. So what you're looking at here is the cloud library, which is our library for digital product passports. It was developed open source with the Department of Energy in the US, believe it or not, and we've extended it with data space capabilities. So it has a REST interface. That REST interface will be extended to be DPP spec compliant. Obviously, the spec isn't released yet, so as soon as the spec comes out, we'll extend the REST interface with DPP. You can upload your digital product passports using this tool here. It's built in. And then there's also a viewer where you can actually look at the individual data spaces. So if I search for Munich, you can see there are several, there's over 6,000 digital product passports for the Munich production site. So I can look at it here. And this is the normal interface that we have for all OPC UA compliant digital product passports. And here, for example, we have the product carbon footprint. So this is what is happening right now in terms of the data collection. So we're focusing on product carbon footprint, which is the most difficult piece in a battery passport, in a digital product passport for the battery. Because not only do you need to obviously collect CO2 emissions that are generated during your production, but also from your supply chain. In fact, your supply chain is probably going to make up 90% of your of your carbon footprint for your digital product passport. So this is something that is incredibly difficult to collect, and that's why we said we'll do that one first. If we can do that, we can do all the other ones too. So here it is. Let me show you a different one. I also have one where there are actually some values, I believe. Let me just see if I can find one. I think this one here. This one here should have some values. So if I go in digital product passport, carbon footprint, product carbon footprint, and this is the CO2 equivalent. Yeah, and there's a value. So this value was generated from what we received from the factory, plus some supply chain data. Now the supply chain data is simulated, but it's based on real values that we think is right. Now obviously, getting the data from your supply chain is incredibly complex, but again, we have what we call a data processor that taps into your supply chain and gets the data, does the calculation across all 3 scopes. So if you're familiar with product carbon footprint, there are 3 scopes of data that you need to take care of. Scope 1 is your fossil fuel consumption. Scope 2 is your energy usage during production, and then Scope 3 is your supply chain and the use of the product out in the field. And maybe this is another important point. You will need to connect your battery to a system that also collects data during the life cycle or during the entire life of the battery. So you need to collect things like charging cycles, age, how many times and how fast the battery was charged. All of this ends up being part of the digital battery passport. So there are several sources of data. One source is not going to do it. There are several sources of data that you need to connect to the system, and the reference architecture from the Cloud Initiative caters for that. And with that, I'm actually 1 minute and 17 seconds early.
I shake your head. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. If you want to get a brochure, there are several copies here that you can pick one up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, our rock star speakers that are always on time. No pressure on the last 2 whatsoever in terms of being on time, but there is an example that has been set here. No, very nice presentation. We got some very concrete, specific examples. It reminds us on some level around, okay, what are the drivers of a data space actually coming about? Public policy plays a role. At the end of the day, this has to be done, and here's the deadline, and that has a way of sharpening minds at the end of the day, and that can be a business case. I would also love to have a discussion on the reference architecture and the relationship between cloud and data spaces, which I think would be like a different conversation completely, but that's what evenings are for and glasses of wine. But thank you very much, that was great. So I'm going to invite our next speaker to come to the floor, who did tell me and even gave me a metaphor for how to pronounce his name, but I'm just going to let you introduce yourself so that I don't get myself in trouble.
Thank you very much.
And it's over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Evsebu Katana. So I'm representing Ethico from Brussels, ITS Europe. And I have the pleasure, of course, to give you a short presentation about, of course, this very challenging topic, so related to European mobile data space, and also, of course, to talk about interoperability, of course, governance and compliance. So quite a very complex task. So where is this magic? So the main challenges, of course, as you know very well, mobility systems are not only technically complex, but also administratively fragmented. So those colleagues involved in this domain knows very well. So fragmented regulatory reporting across cities and jurisdictions. There are a number of challenges, of course, related to monitoring in real time. So I'm referring to service level qualities, I'm referring to emissions, I'm referring to safety. On top of it, of course, we have extra, the battery.
Don't worry, the battery won't explode. It'll be fine.
I hope.
I'll take that off here.
On top of it, of course, we have extra complexity from emerging mobility technology. So here, of course, I'm referring to autonomous vehicles, but not only. How we can manage, how we can tackle these challenges. As you know, there were created a national access point, of course, to enable access, exchange, and reuse of transport data across Europe. I included here, of course, a number of well-known, of course, regulation governed from different data domains. So one classical example, of course, you know very well, multimodal travel information, but also real-time traffic information, safety, security, transportation, and so on. What is very important to highlight that each regulation introduces distinct reporting, validation, and compliance requirements. What is the solution? So we have the ambition, of course, to develop this federated mobility data space, and I will include in my next slide a number of flagship projects, and I will give you more details. Because we believe that, of course, when we develop this new solution, of course, this will support a streamlined data exchange, where operators can publish standardized data sets once, regulatory requirements, of course, will be able to encode as policy as code, and also real-time compliance could be done, of course, online. So I'm referring to service level agreement, I'm referring to emission, I'm referring to safety. So the idea, of course, is to move on, and compliance should become a continuous and automated instead of manual and repetitive as is now. I included here, of course, several examples from our work, so from mobility, from the community. What is very important, of course, the alignment with European standards. Our mobility community, of course, they are involved in a number of projects, so I included here a couple of projects. So you deploy European mobility data space. Some of you are already involved. Of course, NAPCOR is the follow-up of NAPCOR, so I have here one of my colleagues involved. But I included, of course, a number of sectorial projects which would tackle a number of challenges related, for instance, SCUDO, for instance, for disruption of transport across the TEN-T corridor in Europe. 3DXverse is contributing to develop local digital twin toolbox for cities. So this will be a tool in the next coming years for cities. And I hope, of course, to give you a very nice demonstrator next time. Open Cloud Edge IoT, they are trying to bring together, of course, application layers, security layer, of course, with the cloud services. And last but not least, so this week, Thursday and Friday will be the kickoff meeting of Boost European Data Infrastructure Consortium for transport, logistics, and mobility together with the Spanish ministry. So we expect that, of course, in 3 years' time, the mobility landscape will be completely different. Of course, we need a lot of support, a lot of development, technical development related, of course, to connectors, related to adapters, related to semantics. I included here, of course, the first examples, okay, which Datex is a long story, started in 95, something like that. I was a young postgraduate when I started the first Datex project, okay, and then one by one, a number of top. We should align, of course, with the current development, of course, within mobility space, IDSA, GAIX, so all those colleagues, of course, are working with us. I would like, of course, to conclude with a number of ideas, of course. The current status, we know very well, the fragmented regulation, of course, the data are in the silos. These are slowing down the efficiency, of course, the innovation, because we are talking, of course, this competition between, of course, Europe and USA. So we have a number of challenges that, of course, we should tackle, and, of course, we should work hard. We learn from a national access point, of course, how multiple regulation can create complex and overlapping data and reporting obligations. So our aim, of course, by developing together with the data space community, the future European data space, of course, mobility, we should be able to report once, comply everywhere, to standardize data and policy as a code. Of course, we should align with all the other development, so in this domain, of course, and these will be able, of course, we'll be able to pave the way for future-ready mobility services. So our target, of course, is to use this data space-driven approach because we are, let's say, pretty sure that this will transform regulation from a bottleneck, which we have now, into a future enabler. Thank you very much. Oh, if there are questions.
That was too much time now. It's very good.
I checked this morning.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that brings us to our last speaker of the day. You have like 3 minutes to come to the stage, and then you have 10 minutes, so you'll have plenty of time.
No.
Just keep trying.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. We can chat 3 minutes. No, I'm not going to take more than 5 minutes because I'm so happy. Hello, by the way. My name is Suna. I'm coming from Belgium, Brussels, representing 2 entities, Artec International and the Beyond Barcode. Beyond Barcode is our DPP spin-off. Generally, I'm the only person who is the DPP lady of all conference, so I can say that I'm a bit surprised and positively surprised that I have seen today too many DPP related and how it's aligned with the data spaces related problems. So maybe we can have a a group therapy altogether that how we can solve those things. How I'm going to open the presentation?
There was. Oh, he's stolen it. Oh,
So beautiful. No problem, no problem. Oh,
sat down too quick.
is it working?
Green button.
Okay.
The big one in the middle.
All right. So, some of you all might know us from some European projects as well. We are quite an active on particularly data ones and so on, and we are coordinating and partnering and stuff and so on. We are a member of technology platforms like BDVA, Fireware, ADRA, and ARPA, and I'm also so happy to hear that Microsoft is also doing open source framework for DPP. Just within the parenthesis, I don't know how we will be continue, but for Fireware, we were also initiated and reached a certain level of maturity for open DPP framework, where the European SMEs will be struggling for upcoming. I think it might be nice to discuss further that how we can collaborate together. As you might see that we also acting as the DPP, as a service DPP operator, hopefully with the implementing act that we will know how to be operator and stuff and so on. So we are providing those technologies, particularly onboarding the OEMs and SMEs. Today, I will not repeat, but if you are from the manufacturing sector, you are quite aligned, you are quite aware of those upcoming regulations, which are already started 2019 with the Green Deal ones. But it's aligned with this auto-compliance things that, as you see in the data union strategy, DPP is now becoming an embedded layer for auto-compliance. So this is how we see the things, and we see that this is not going to be limited by the two domains, but it's going to be the next level of product compliance via the DPPs. I think it's the Q3 that we will know with the EU Product Act. So, I don't know how to differentiate my speech now, because so many things has been said and has been mentioned, but yes, now, the thing is that what you have shown here are a bit on the paper, and we are now deploying the battery passports in India, in Vietnam, and so on. It's not that much affecting. What I can say that it's not only about a European thing, but we need a compliance automation ecosystem, which is also referring not the European, but also including the non-European entities and also involving them in the standardization as well. So, David, you asked me that what we have done now and where we are heading. So on our side, on the Beyond Barcode, we are now providing a bit more simplification mapping for the product compliance, because OEMs are a bit freaked out. More than OEMs, their suppliers are more freaked out that they won't be able to operate their next 10 years of businesses and stuff. So, like Microsoft team showed that there is a huge need for an open reference, for an reference architecture for DPP, for a huge and more adoption to be able to execute that, let's say, regulations and all these initiatives. So, with Beyond Barcode, we already created a bit more connector-agnostic data spaces onboarding, because certain data spaces, as you know, that sectoral ones, country ones are preferring some connectors, so we kind of created a bit connector-agnostic structure to make them, let's say, easier to onboard. And also for, as many of the speakers are also mentioned here, that the sector ontology, particularly in the morning that the Surpass project people mentioned, that there are some sectors that the ontology is also by itself quite a big problem, but for the 2027 mandatory one, at least we provided them pre-built, let's say, templates to be able to execute. How we solve this, let's say, templates and also the data collection problems. Of course, we used and we exploited the LLMs for the semantic interoperability, which is in the era that the DPP standards has not been published. So we need to start to prepare them to be able to prepare for the mandatory era. So we use the LLMs for data collection side, let me say the semantics side, to ease their problems for particularly the whole supply chain. Maybe I should say now, what was the new word? Supply value network, sorry, value network. So in that regard, we are using so many different components to be able to execute to, let's say, these problems. With the commission, with this CEMIC, let's say, organization, we already made a huge workshop with the participation of the BDB colleagues, that we also explained that how we can also provide LLM-based architecture for an open DPP. So it could be interesting if you can, if you would like to have a look at this, the work or workshop, there is this, the link below, you can find the details over there. I am just, let's say, moving forward, where we are heading. Since, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we need kind of a unified rulebook. Unified rulebook is that, okay, on the, let's say, the member state level or EU level, we are running through this, the rulebook and stuff, but there's nothing equivalent in exist in the Asia or US, as far as we know, that this needs a bit more unified work. This needs a bit more federation work between the two frameworks. So that will give us this baseline to be able to execute the dynamic auto-compliance engine where we are now working on, that is going to be working across data spaces, but also across framework, and also across, let's say, different legal ecosystems. So again, I'm just referring in the back that we need the automated, let's say, compliance automation ecosystem, not just the EU side. To sum up, I would like to, I hope I'm not gonna repeat again, but maybe one thing that people did not mention is that there's not much synergies are going, particularly under the Sentinel. There is a huge work is going on GTC 25 for the data spaces standards, but there's not any link or direct, people are cross-referencing GTC 24, which is the digital product passport format. In the current one, let's say, documentation, current release, we are just seeing that they are mentioning, oh yeah, there is a data spaces, but there's nothing related to, for their 8 modules of standards has been mentioned over there. So maybe it's a nice idea that maybe they can also consider this kind of a solution that an SME is already applying and also operating with this transition period. So I guess I'm done. Yes, this is my contact details. If you would like to find me, I would be happy to discuss further, particularly with you. Thank you very much.
50 seconds. Well done, well done.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, it's on time. You have 50 seconds to gently go down the stage. Well, I will just give 30 seconds of concluding remarks, and we can all go to the most important part of the event, which is to drink coffee and whatever little snacks they have, because the food's been really good, I have to say. I'm very happy with that. But maybe just in a few concluding remarks, what I would want to have as a takeaway here is, first of all, that compliance is not a dirty word at the end of the day. You know, we have rules in society, and we want businesses to compete with one another on a level playing field. And that requires them to follow certain rules, and they have to comply with them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The rules can be too complicated. The Commission has talked about simplification. That's not to say that certain rules aren't good or bad. Nonetheless, compliance is a reasonable ask. And as we have been talking about today, it is also a value proposition for data spaces, which is what we started with. We heard Bertrand, I heard 120 million, I heard 10 million, I heard millions of euros of savings at the end of the day. And we've also had, we've seen from Microsoft, we've seen from Suna, the sort of demonstration of actual components that are currently being built. It is tangible and it is very close, and it is a business waiting to happen. For me, what I would want to continue to hear, and I hope to hear in conversations today and tomorrow, is business plans and business cases. Because at the end of the day, it's like, yes, compliance is an opportunity. Who is going to take that forward? Which company is going to be doing that? And where is the funding coming from at the end of the day? And it's not all government funding, because there is a value proposition, which means we don't need government funding to make the business. So that's what I would leave everybody with, to think about putting this into operation, because that's where we are now. Thank you very much for all of your attention. Thank you very much to our speakers, to the fireside chat discussions from DG Connect. I hope you enjoyed the session today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the program.